So, I have a very short bio that I'm going to read. T and I were joking about it. We don't like when the bio's 18 pages long, and so I'm happy today, and I had the privilege of meeting him a few weeks ago, and some of you obviously know him from the greetings that I've seen. Is Mr. JaMarr Brown is the founder of the Selling in Color sales system and host of the Break It Down Brown internet, radio, and online television program. He has an award-winning track record in corporate America, achieving such awards as Salesperson of the Year, Sales Manager of the Year, and being a VP of Sales for a billion-dollar medical device company by the age of 30. JaMarr is the author of 3 books and several audio programs, including his latest release titled How to Deal with Post-Traumatic Sales Syndrome. I like that. Gotta have humor in everything. His passion is to help business professionals uncover and unlock and unleash their true potential. JaMarr will be sharing with us today the 5 mindsets of sales success. Let's give a big welcome to Mr. JaMarr Brown.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
How's everyone doing this morning?
Awesome. Great.
Good. I'm JaMarr Brown. Today we're going to talk about the 5 mindsets of sales success. I'm going to, kind of talk about why I believe mindset is the most important thing over behaviors in terms of us as sales professionals. I consider all of us sales professionals. And so, but I wanted to start with a funny story. You may have noticed a limp that I have, those of you that saw me walk in. And the limp is because I actually injured myself playing basketball 3 weeks ago. And so when I go to the gym, the mind says, do not go to the basketball court. But then the other part of the mind says this. I remember when I was in college, at Whittier College, I played basketball. And so the other part of the mind said, well, it's okay. Just go ahead and go in there. And I went in there. And how many of you had that moment in your life where you realize that your body can't do what your mind is thinking? So that's really where I am now. That's a picture of me the other day outside Walmart. So I'm recovering. So basketball is over now, so I want to golf. So I'm going to talk to you about the power of the mind today and why I believe that's so important for sales success. The program I founded is called Selling in Color. I've been using it for the past 15 years in corporate America. I'll talk a little bit about where the program came from, but it's really for 2 groups. The first group is for sales professionals and sales teams. And I believe that the key thing is you want to sell the way your customers want to buy. How many of you have a certain style that you know to utilize? Right? We all have a certain style, a certain approach. But the key thing is, what is a customer thinking? What is a prospect thinking? What is a homeowner thinking? What is a business person thinking? And so a major part of my program is focused on how do we get into the mind of our customers. So we'll talk about some of that today. The other aspect of it, I do a lot of training for corporate America, and I believe that the 2 biggest issues in corporate are 2 things. Number 1, the culture of the organization. Either is it clear? You guys have a very strong culture here. As a matter of fact, I showed up 3 weeks ago, and I sat in the back room just to see what I was going to get myself into, and I was very impressed with your group. And so part of it is having a strong culture. The other part is communication, because as we all know, how many of you had an experience where one statement or one comment led to a major issue, right? And it could be when you're talking to a prospect, a homeowner, or somebody you're trying to work with, and there's something that's said, and you go, wow, this is going down real fast. You all have that experience? And so a big part of that is communication. So a lot of my programs focus on how do we effectively communicate with others? How do we understand how to communicate with different personality types? That's a big part of my program that I'll touch on today, but that's another big part of what I do. So I'm not going to go into my entire background. You probably can't read that whole slide. That's my entire career in one slide. I'm going to focus on the very second line there, which basically is, it says sales manager or salesperson of the year. So I began my career at Allergan Pharmaceuticals as a 17-year-old kid. They gave me an internship when I was at Whittier College. I spent the first summer copying, collating, getting coffee and that type of thing. And the second summer they said, come back and we're going to give you a small cell, 65 doctors in San Diego with a company card and expense account. Go out and see if you can sell this contact lens care medication. So there I was as a 17-year-old kid with a company card down in San Diego. That's how I got my start in sales. Something went well, and they invited me to come back as a full-time salesperson when I graduated. And here's a part of the story that's really interesting. How many of us, when we first got into real estate, or first got into your business, you thought, I'm going to be very successful? Raise your hand. So the others thought I was just going to be average and and not do that well and just try and survive. Let's try that again, right? Because sometimes we're kind of shy about saying what we really want. So how many of us, when we first got into this business, thought we were going to be very successful? Absolutely, right? And I was the same way. Think about it. I was a 17-year-old kid with this great job. I get into corporate America, and I get this full-time pharmaceutical sales job in Los Angeles. The territory was ranked 123 out of 127 when I first got it. I told everyone I was going to be salesperson of the year. And after 2 years, guess where I found myself?
Salesperson of the year.
No. I found myself, there were layoffs. You know, some of us have survived layoffs, some haven't, right? There were layoffs, went down to 98 salespeople. And I was 93 out of 98 that second year. So I basically hadn't moved a single spot. So my boss called me in and said, look, basically your sales numbers suck. I think you're burned out. I think you're not cut out for sales. I think you should look for a different opportunity. As a matter of fact, if you don't improve your sales results, I'm going to fire you. And there I was thinking, I was just in San Diego, I was selling this product, I was at Whittier College, I did all these things, and I thought I was going to be very successful. I thought this was it for me, and I'm being told that you're no good at what I thought was going to be my life. So put a pin in that for a second. A year later, I was on stage as the #1 salesperson at Allergan Pharmaceuticals, #1 out of 98. So what created that massive change? Because my behaviors didn't really change. I always worked hard. How many of us work hard? You know, we all work hard, right? We all know what we're supposed to do. We all know you have the websites, you have the information that's handy in front of us. So I had all that. So what changed? What created that massive change? Did my customer base change? No. Did my products change?
No.
No. Did the competition change?
No.
Well, they got more excited because they were kicking my butt. So they were happy that I was failing. So what changed? The change was in the mindset. And I'm going to share with you how powerful it is, that mindset shift in terms of shifting your results, whether you're doing well right now or whether you would like to have additional performance no matter what your current level is. So I'm going to share with you what are some of those mindsets. So we have a situation right now, we have what's called the gap. We have our current mindset, then we have what we'd like to achieve, our sales results. And the difference between the two is based on two things. Number one, we can read the top word in blue is what? Mindset. On the bottom is what? Behaviors. Why is mindset on top of behaviors?
More important.
More important. Why is that?
Determines your behavior.
Determines your behaviors. There's a really good book by James Allen called As in the which says, thought is the ancestor of action. Before any action comes a thought. I'm going to show you how two people can have the exact same behaviors and have drastically different results. And that's because the mindset is different between the two people. So I'm going to share that with you. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions to see if you've been affected by a term I call post-traumatic sales syndrome. Okay? And so here's the first question. Are you happy with your current results? Anybody? Who's happy with their current results? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, you? Okay, all right, so we all want more, right? I mean, we all want more, but we're currently happy. All right, what about this? Are you underperforming right now? Absolutely. You can be shy in this part of the program, you know. When I do this with groups, I say, look, what happens in this room stays in this room, right? But if you're not real with yourself, it's very difficult to create the change that you want if you're not honest with yourself, right? What about this one? Are you concerned that you may not be able to sustain your current level of success? You're afraid that the bottom might fall out. You're afraid that things might go wrong. Okay? Some point, right? Sometimes. How about this one? This is my favorite one. Are you concerned that you might be a one-hit wonder and can't repeat past success?
Absolutely.
Right? There's a person that I coach, and he was sort of in that middle of the road for a bunch of years. He had this lightning thought, and he achieved President's Club last year in his business, which is top 5%. Well, this year he's back in the middle, and his boss is on his case, and he's dealing with all this stress and pressure. He's trying to figure out, how do I get back to that level of success I used to have? So it doesn't work for everybody, but it happens to a lot of people. How about this one? Are you struggling just trying to figure something out? Maybe you're new to this business. Maybe you tried some things that haven't worked, right? So those are the things. So here's the thing. There's something called, I believe it's called post-traumatic sales syndrome, which affects salespeople. And I just literally released a CD yesterday, as a matter of fact, it's a 60-minute audio on this topic, because I believe that a lot of us are struggling with the mindset of trying to be a salesperson each and every single day. And so the CD contains 8 stages of post-traumatic stress syndrome and the 10 solutions for post-traumatic stress syndrome. As a matter of fact, I'm going to give away the very first CD right now. If you look under your table, reach under your table, someone has a CD under their table.
I got it.
Yeah, right under here.
Nope.
It's in one of these seats.
Nope.
Did we get it? There we go. All right. So feel free to take a listen and then give me a call. So the question is, what affects a person's mindset, right? So let's talk about that. Have you heard of the 80-20 rule? Right? Now there's an aspect of the 80-20 rule you may not have thought about. And the question is, what about the other 80? That's the key question. Because as a VP of sales, national sales director, I built sales organizations. The last company I worked at, we went from 8 salespeople to 32 salespeople, built the entire organization. But the numbers hold true. And that is that 20% on average of the people produce 80% of the result. Now you may have heard of the 80-20 rule on the opposite side, which is 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. Well, on the other side, when you look at it from a sales management perspective, this is true. So my question is, if 20% account for 80% of sales, and I read an article recently, because I spoke at a real estate group last week, did some research, and I saw that the National Association of Realtors back in 2016 published a very similar number, which is 20% of agents account for 80% of closings. And so this 20% number holds true across all kinds of industries. But my question is, what about the 80%? What type of training from a mindset perspective is for them? What is happening when they're finding themselves not producing the results that they want? I'm going to show you that oftentimes, instead of being motivated, they are discouraged. And I'm going to share with you exactly how that happens. Now, who knows what the bell curve is? How many of us have children? Right? Okay? You know, the grades come out, you see A, B. Well, I hope you don't go past B, right? Sometimes they dip. But the whole idea is a bell curve. So here's a bell curve from a sales perspective. And that is that if you're in the top 15, 20% in general, you're considered a rainmaker. And I remember in corporate America, we'd have these meetings every year. We'd bring up the top salespeople every single year, right? And they get on stage, they get their awards, everybody clapped. They were hailed as the greatest thing in the world. And here's what's funny. When I was a struggling salesperson, what do you think I said?
In the back of
In
the
the
room.
back of the room. Didn't anybody come up to me and said, "You're doing good"? No. You were like a leper, right? But then a year later, when you win salesperson of the year, guess what?
Yeah.
Oh, you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Oh, yesterday you said I was terrible, right? So that's the external part of it. But what happens to your psyche? What happens to you when you go from a top performer, that 15%, and you dip into the middle, and you're considered average? What does your mind go through? What about when you're in that bottom part? You don't need to raise your hand. I will tell you my story. I was there. That last 15% was failing and falling. And you're under constant pressure of what? Trying to pay your bills. Trying to survive. Trying to avoid your boss like I was. I didn't want to answer the phone, right? And how do you think you perform when you're trying to get business, when you're going through those thoughts and attitudes? It's very difficult. It's very difficult. So I said, if that's the reality, and no one's talking about that, why don't we focus on that? And that's really a major motivation for what I do. How do we shift those that are in that average to the bottom, to the top, and continue to have the ones that are in the top go even further forward? So that's a major focus of what I do. So here's a question. If everyone knows the same information, right? You all know your business better than I do, but generally, you're trained the same way, you have access to the same information, you have access to the same resources. If that's the case, then why are the results different? Mindset. Yeah? Let me show you a couple of things. The difference is only 3 feet and 4 inches. And the 3 feet is the space between you and a prospect or a client when you're having that discussion. How impactful it is. How powerful that interaction is. And we're not going to spend time on that today, but I developed a whole host of things to help you understand how do you have maximum impact and increase your rate of success when you're in front of that person at 3 feet of space. The bigger challenge, though, is the 4 inches between here. Right? What we are thinking when we're in that space. And I tell the joke all the time, when you call these customer service lines, they all have the same script. But why is the experience with one person different than somebody else? Their attitude, their approach, the way they think, how they approach you as a customer. So, we're going to talk about that 4 inches of space. So, in the program I developed, this really based on 3 things. The 5 mindsets of sales success, which is what I'm going to share with you today. Also, there's a 7-step sales process when you're in front of that customer. How do you create maximum impact? And the third one is a personality-based system. How many of you have taken Myers-Briggs and DISC and all those assessments? Yeah. Right? They're all, and I suggest you take all of them. They're all really good. There's one that I use called Selling in Color, which is really simple, which shows you how to read someone very quickly based on their body language, based on their office setup, based on their verbal style, so you can quickly get into their head and understand how to talk to them the way they want to be spoken to. But today we're going to talk about the 5 mindsets of sales success. And once again, the ancestor to every action is thought. That's by Ralph Waldo Emerson. So what are some of the mindsets we can incorporate to help us either go from where we are now to where we're going to get to, or to continue to have success if you're already happy with where you're at? The first one is called a beginner's mindset. Now, there's 2 aspects of a beginner's mindset. The first is, and this is interesting, the worst group I speak to are salespeople, true salespeople. The most I shouldn't say the worst, because I enjoy speaking. The most challenging, how about that? The most challenging. Why is that the case? Because, I know we're being recorded, because they sit there, and I'm giving these things, and they're like this. What are they thinking? I know this. I know that. I'm better. I know that. That's nothing new. I've heard that all before, right? And they miss it. They miss it because their mind is closed off to learning something new. One of my mentors told me, you haven't thought of your greatest idea yet. And that drives me each and every single day. And you can listen to any speaker, you can read any book, and you can learn something that could change your life right now if you are open to listening to it. So the first part of this beginner's mindset is wipe the slate clean. Try to listen for something that you haven't heard before that could really be applied today that can drastically change your result. The other part of the beginner's mindset is what? When we have experiences with a potential prospect or customer in the past, and let's say it didn't work out, and then you find yourself with somebody different, and it's a similar type of vibe, what do? We go through a mental Rolodex, and we go, well, this is how I handled it back then. This situation seems similar, and so you apply the same approach to something that was done years ago. And let me ask you a question. Why do we exist? Why do we have a job? Why do we have this industry? Why do salespeople exist? What's the number one reason? Right? So sales, right?
Money.
Money to help.
Products need to be sold.
Products need to be sold. Right? Relationships. Here's the number one reason. Because people change their mind. If no one ever changed their mind, I wouldn't be here, and you wouldn't be there. But things can change in an instant. And I tell you that as I went from last in the country to number 1, calling on the same people who before literally kicked me out of their office. And I had to go back in, and some of them became my top customers. Now, if we have more time, I'll share with you the details of that. But it started with this beginner's mindset, going in with a new perspective, not taking old information into a new situation. Approach things with a beginner's mindset. The second one is this, the success equation. Now, this is not math. It's a letter equation. If you're taking notes, you can write this down. If not, you can just listen to me. It's PT plus PD equals CR. In the interest of time, I'll tell you what that means. Your past thoughts plus your past behaviors equal your current result. So where you are right now is based on the thoughts you had in the past, your behavior, and your result. Now, some people, like my friend, we play golf, and he complains about the golf course. Oh, the golf course sucks. The greens. I'm like, we're all playing the same golf course. I mean, I shot 78, you shot 98. I'll take your money, but you don't play the golf course. So sometimes we blame the golf course, right? And so now, but if we want to get to a different result, right? We want to have a different result. What do we have to do? Right? And it's so simple. I love it. It's your CR, which stands for, our CT stands for what? Current thoughts plus your current behaviors equal what? A future result. So you look at the result that you want in the future, and you basically align your thoughts and you align your behaviors with somebody that can achieve those results. And you make the shifts right now, which will lead to something in the future. And the key thing about that is, don't compare the result of things, right? So I'm most struggling. I looked at, I'm 93 out of 98, and here's this person up on stage. Why am I not on stage? I looked at their results versus my result. But here's what I changed it to. What is their process versus my process? Because the only way to get to the result is through a process, your current thoughts and behaviors. And so when you shift your process and compare what is your process versus the process of somebody who's achieving what you want to achieve. And once you start to align with that, you'll start to see some shifts. The third one is your ego and success, how the ego affects us, right? And this is a big one because there's two parts of the ego. The first part of the ego is when we're doing well, when we're having massive success, what do we think? Or what can happen? Ego gets big. What? We tell ourselves we are the greatest thing in the world, greatest thing since sliced bread. I'm infallible, I'm untouchable, I'm so wonderful. And then what can happen when you get to that point?
You fall down.
You fall down. But why do you fall down?
You lose sight of
You lose sight of it?
Stop the process.
Yeah,
There you go.
process, yeah.
Because you stop doing the things you did to get there in the first place. Right? And so what happens is you start to do things differently. And then what happens to the other side of the ego? When you start to fall down and things aren't going the way you want them to go. What do? Right? You talk and you beat yourself up. And you blame outside factors, other people, other things, and this and that. One of the most poignant moments that changed my career was when I was at the bottom and the VP of sales came to work with me. Now, in those days, when the VP of sales would come out to work with you, it was literally to give you a pink slip and take your car keys. That's why they came out. And so I was literally thinking, I'm going to get fired. So I picked him up at the airport, and I'm, your mind goes through all these things when you think you're about to, get fired. Who's ever thought about that? No, don't answer that. I'll answer for you, right? So he gets in the car, and guess what he says? JaMarr. And they use the word suck a lot. Your sales numbers suck. They were really brutal. Why is that? And my ego kicked in. I'm like, well, it's just a really bad territory. The compensation plan doesn't really fit this territory. The managed care environment is not good. And he said, JaMarr, whose responsibility is it? I said, well, it's a really bad territory. The compensation plan is not really good. And he asked me 5 times in a row, whose responsibility is it? And the 5th time, I'm like, I better give a different answer. This could go on all day. But I was afraid to give this answer because what? I thought he was going to say, you're right and you're fired. Here's the answer I gave him. When he said, whose responsibility is it? I said, my responsibility. And I'm just like, oh, here we go. I'm done. And guess what he said? Now I can teach you something.
Good.
And I changed my perspective. I changed my attitude. I changed my thought process. And I was at this beginner's mindset, and he taught me the things I needed to do to be successful. And that really was my driving force behind helping other people who were going through similar things that I went through. That's why I write books and new programs, partly because of that moment. So the key thing is, don't let your ego get in the way of your success. The 4th one is this, the Kaizen way philosophy. Who's heard of the term Kaizen? Nobody? Okay, Kaizen means continuous improvement. It's a Japanese term. I won't go through the history of it. But basically, I developed this philosophy around this use of the word Kaizen. And it's based on 3 things. Number 1, the relentless focus on excellence. And the excellence is defined as your purpose and as your why. Because sometimes in life, we disconnect our activities from our purpose. This is my first sales book, right? Which tells the whole story of me going from last place to number 1 in the country and all the things that a person goes through behind the scenes. But what picture's on the cover of this book? You. Little, me? Well, I'm not a 5-year-old girl. Never have been, by the way. But anyways, so it's a picture of my daughter when she was 5 years old. And they go, why would you have a picture of a little girl on the cover of a sales book? Because that's my purpose. When I get up every single day, that's what I think about. leaving a legacy for her. So everything that I do. And so when you're faced with having to get up and make the number of sales calls you need to make the number of phone calls you need to make, go back and try to turn your sales situation around and go back and try to get additional business, and things are going poor and you're struggling, what do you center on? What do you think about? What's going to help you keep going?
That's your why.
That's my why. And so for everybody, if you haven't really centered on your why, or you haven't really thought about it, or maybe because for whatever reason it's kind of become an afterthought, center on your why and on your purpose, and let that drive you each and every single day. When I talk to somebody, they go, wow, you seem so passionate, so committed. I'm thinking about leaving a legacy for my daughter. So nothing's going to stop me from doing what I need to do. And sometimes we disconnect from that. We wake up and it's just activity after activity after activity. We don't connect our purpose to the activity. When you do that, you'll be amazed at what can happen. The second part is what I love, which is eliminate wasteful thoughts and behaviors. How many of us can tolerate a lot more information, right? It's like information overload these days. So the key thing is, what needs to be eliminated from our behaviors that are not conducive to our success? What are the non-productive activities that we have that can be eliminated? More importantly, what are the mindsets that are not productive? And there's an exercise that I do when I have more time, where I have everybody stand up, and we go through this Simon Says exercise. And I show you how your mind really affects your activity just each and every single day. But just think in the interest of time, what are the mindsets that are not conducive to your success? What mindsets are not helping you get to where you want to get to? And you eliminate those mindsets. The third aspect is continuous improvement. Because once again, sometimes we want to compare the result of our results versus somebody else's. But the only way to get forward is to look at the process of things. And you want to have a 10% difference in what you do each and every single day, which equates to a major change in result. So that's the continuous improvement aspect. The fifth mindset is to enjoy the process and the journey. And one of the things I tell people sometimes is, sometimes we fall out of love with ourselves. Sometimes we forget how special, how gifted, how talented we are. I asked a group the other day, I said, how many of you, when was the last time somebody told you, nice job, you're special, you're gifted, you're talented? Yesterday, that's awesome. One hand went up. I'm like, why is that? But more importantly, when was the last time you told yourself that? Because there's a really good book by Sean Anker, he's a Harvard professor, called The Happiness Advantage. And the premise of the book is this: people don't feel happy and successful when they achieve success. They achieve success because they feel happy and successful right now. And sometimes we forget that. So the key thing is, right now, how can you enjoy the journey? How can you reconnect with your purpose? How can you get up every single day, love who you are, love what you're doing, and let that drive you on your process towards where you want to get to? So those are the 5 mindsets of sales success. A couple things before we wrap up. I offer different types of programs, whether it be one-on-one training, coaching, things like that. You can definitely see myself or Shelly, who I work with in the back of the room. I don't leave time for questions. I think we have like about 5 minutes for questions. Yeah. So we'll do that. So if you have any questions, we'll do that in a second. But also on November 3rd, because what I do is with these mindsets, with the training, we spent an entire day working together, working the mindsets, and looking at your own personal development plan. And so the city of Temecula asked me to come out and do a program actually in the city, which is open to everybody in the Inland Empire. And we'll have, if you're interested, come and see me afterwards. But it's November 3rd, 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. We're going to spend an entire day going through the mindsets, going through the sales behaviors, going through the sales process. And it's called the Sales Accelerator Academy. And it's going to be tremendous. So if you're interested in that type of program, definitely see me after. Also, I have one additional gift. I don't have, is there a business card box somewhere? Over there? Let's do this. Can we just pull somebody's business card, please?
Yes, sir, you have
Yeah,
a
we'll
card.
pull.
We've already got that.
All right, we're going to pull. What's that? Who always wins?
Heidi.
Heidi? Let me see here.
Yeah, so
Lorena.
Lorena killed her.
There you go, right in front. All right, so.
It's okay, it's not
Put my card back here.
The official part is going back in. So, all right. So, like I said, this was a brief overview. I appreciate your time, appreciate your attention. Hopefully, there's something that you got out of today that can really be applied today to help you continue on the journey to where you want to get to. We have a couple minutes for questions. So, yes, sir.
How can we get your audio series?
Okay, the question, how can we get the audio series? I have CDs available today. Literally, they were printed last night, so I have some today, including my What's Your Sell Story book. And I also wrote a children's book and others book. There's other books up here you can take a look at, but they're available today. I only have like 10 of them because I did a quick run, but you can get that today. Okay. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I'm just curious, what are some of the attributes and characteristics of creating like a really great mindset?
Of training a mindset? Or?
Yeah, like, obviously you start at a certain spot, so how you make it better and make improvements and develop it, what are some of the key things that you do?
Awesome. Great question. The question is, what are some of the mindsets or ways to really approach this so that you can incorporate the mindsets that we're talking about? I think there's three things. Number one, well, two main things. Number one, is I call the 2 C's, choice and change. First, you have to make a choice that you're going to apply a change and then apply the change, right? And a big part of it is, and that's why the book that I wrote, now, and here's, some people say, well, JaMarr, I thought this was a sales talk. Where's all the behavior? If you want to know the behaviors of sales, I can tell you those all day. There's really 5 things, 5 aspects of every sales program. Introduction, identify needs, benefit selling, agreement, and close. And there's things wrapped around that with objection handling. And actually the workbook that I have has all of that in there. So I do a training on all of that. But everything starts with the mindset of everything. And so a lot of it is looking in the mirror and saying, where I am now, how far is that from where I want to be? And just saying, I'm willing to do what it takes to get to where I want to be, and then applying the changes every single day. But the first is responsibility, and then making a choice to change, and then actually doing the change.
So what's one of the things that holds people back from creating a positive mindset? And not, because obviously not everyone has that championship mindset that you're talking about on a daily basis, and that can keep it up consistently over a long period of time.
Yeah, the question is, what is one thing that can hold people back from having that positive mindset? And like I said, everything that I speak about and talk to is based on my own personal experience, what I've gone through, but also coaching and training hundreds of people over the last 20 years or so in business. One of the things that holds people back is not being honest with yourself. Not saying that the way I am right now, what I'm doing is not working. It's not conducive to where I want to be. And my dad has a great quote. He says, sometimes the person that you are is not who you thought you would be. And so sometimes you have to just say, am I the person who I thought I would be? And if not, that's okay, right? It's not a matter of beating yourself up. It's a matter of now let's refocus on who do I want to become, what legacy do I want to leave behind, and you start to apply the change. But the key thing is to have your why as the center of what you do. Because if your why and your purpose is not bigger than the work required for change, you're not going to do it. And that's why a lot of times there's stop in certain things, because the purpose isn't big enough. And so we start down a path, and then we hit with a roadblock, and we stop, right? But if your focus and your purpose is your daughter or your family or a mentor that helped you or some deep-rooted why, then you're going to keep persevering through anything. And that's what can help you have that continued and sustained and motivation towards what you want to get to. Good question. Any other questions?
Got one for you.
Yes.
I mean, typically people have habits, and from the standpoint they get into a program or coaching or whatever, what's the time frame normally that they get developed to a process that they'll continue that? Because obviously you're changing your pattern, you're changing your habits.
Right, great question. The question is, people walk into things with certain habits already established. And I think that the base of the question is, how do you break those habits and establish new habits? And how long does it take to break a habit?
Right.
And there's some very intelligent professors that do studies of that say it takes 28 days, 90 days. I personally don't believe that. I've seen people quit smoking and drugs cold turkey. And the question is why? And the answer is why. Because their purpose is big enough, right? I know somebody who stopped taking drugs cold turkey. Why? Because he said, I want to see my grandchildren grow up. So to do that, I gotta change my behaviors. Never did a drug again. Same thing with cigarettes. So from my perspective, in business or any type of change, it's centering on your why. And when that's big enough, you will make the change pretty much instantly, and you'll commit to it because you know there's a bigger reason for what you do. But that's a tremendous question. Thank you very much. Any last questions? All right, once again, there's, if you want information about the Sales Acceleration Workshop on November 3rd, come and see me or Shelly in the back. I want to thank Rochelle for helping put this together. Phenomenal job. Steve, thank you very much.